Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. With that, we move on to the second panel discussion of the Consumer Freedom Conclave, titled Empowering Community Engagement, Creating Consumer-Friendly Regulatory Frameworks. And it's an honor and privilege to welcome and introduce the members of this esteemed panel. First up, we have Professor Bejon Kumar Misra, International Consumer Policy Expert, Honorary Professor at the National Law University, Odisha, Cuttack. Next up, we have Professor Dr. Nimesh G. Desai, Senior Consultant in Psychiatry and former Director, IHBAS. Samrat Chowdhery, Director, Association of Vapers, India, and past President of International Network of Nicotine Consumer Organizations. We also have Yashaswini Basu, Nyaaya's outreach lead at Vidhi, and Dr. Farrukh Khan, advocate partner, Diwan Advocates. Dr. Farrukh Khan is not able to join us during the course of this discussion, but we will hear his thoughts towards the end of this session. Once again, this session will be moderated by Rini Khanna, former TV and radio news anchor, media person, voice of the metros. Rini, once again, over to you.
Thank you very much, once again, Ivan, for all the introductions. Ladies and gentlemen, just a short while ago, we learned about the scientific approach to harm reduction. And in this session, we will focus on the policies governing the segment. As many of you may be aware, in 2007, 2008, the government of India launched the National Tobacco Control Program during the 11th five-year plan, with the aim to, one, create awareness about the harmful effects of tobacco consumption, two, reduce the production and supply of tobacco products, three, ensure effective implementation of the provisions under the Cigarettes and Other Tobacco Products Act 2003, four, to help people quit using tobacco, and five, to facilitate implementation of strategies for prevention and control of tobacco advocated by the WHO Framework Convention of Tobacco Control. Yet, despite these measures, India has the second largest population of tobacco users in the world. And as per the GATS2 survey, India has the second lowest quit rates among surveyed countries, despite high awareness that exists here. Nearly 270 million Indians use tobacco products, and research reports indicate only 2 to 5% of smokers spontaneously quit smoking in India, resulting in premature death and disease. Many countries have recognized that well-regulated, reduced risk tobacco products can improve the health of their populations and lessen smoking rates. Japan has seen a decline in smoking rates at an unparalleled level since the introduction of heated tobacco products. The United Kingdom, for instance, has clearly embraced tobacco harm reductions as part of its tobacco control strategy. The United States Food and Drug Administration recognizes tobacco products exist on a continuum of risk, with combustible products representing the higher, or the highest risk. And recently, New Zealand reversed its ban on e-cigarettes and heated tobacco products with a law designed to achieve a smoke-free New Zealand by 2025. While the government of India has also taken various tobacco control measures, such as the prohibition of advertising of tobacco products and the sale of tobacco products to people under the age of 18, nevertheless, India appears to be missing a critical tobacco control opportunity. Let us now try to understand from our expert panel the missed opportunity and how a progressive policy can help the country achieve its goal. Dr. Nimesh Desai, if I could start with you, what in your view, sir, are some of the leading challenges that consumers struggling with substance abuse face today? in the context of determining whether to quit cold turkey or to find a substitute. Dr. Desai?
Sure. Good morning, Demi. The first thing is that abstinence-oriented programs have very low rates across groups of substance use disorders. Alcohol, other drugs, tobacco, nicotine, what have you. And so that's one reality that we in the clinical practice and the science research field have learned in the last 30 or 40 years. Cold turkey certainly is not a great idea, but abstinence-oriented programs do not work. The problems, as you asked me, are more attitudinal and systemic. Attitudinal problems leading to systemic blocks. And so, like some of us in the clinical and research practice have learned and accepted pragmatism as compared to idealism, that we need to get across through community and awareness and consumer movement to the policy and program level. That let's not aim for a 6-foot high jump if I cannot make it. Let me do a 3.5 or a 4-foot high jump, And so pragmatism over idealism is possibly the need of the day. There are issues about community movement and consumer movement for harm reduction that's positive and negative both. Sure, as it's well known, consumer empowerment and community awareness can work wonders, can move blocks. The trouble is that the reduction in smoking and other tobacco use across the globe and in this country for whatever it's worth has occurred through the concept of passive risk, like it happened in the HIV sphere. And so if I might say again, draw a parallel across spectrum of problems, for all personal behavior problems related to health, passive risk idea seems to work. Now, for advocating for harm reduction as against abstinence-oriented, we need to really find a peg or a lever where we can do that. And I keep scratching my head, and with friends like Samrat and Bejon, that seems a little difficult. So I would really love it if we can somehow find a lever or a peg to push the idea of community really, not just the users asking for harm reduction approaches, but larger communities saying, this is what we require.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Desai. Pragmatic measures versus the idealistic thoughts that are out there. If I could turn to Professor Bejon Misra. Broadly speaking, sir, are safe alternative products generally plagued by inadequate or ineffective policies? And do you think that there is a lack of political will that is here to blame?
Yeah, absolutely. Rini, what we all must appreciate then that when we make a policy or we bring in a regulation, it is brought in by a very deep consultation mechanism. You bring in all the stakeholders, seek their views, and then you make a regulation or a law or a policy. You see, all what you mentioned in your opening remarks were activities which emerged out of an international global negotiation which we did from 2003 to 2004. For 4 years, all the UN countries sat together, including India, taking a leading role in bringing out a document which is known as the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. And as you will know, India was one of the first countries to bring in a regulation on tobacco, manufacturing, distribution, advertisement, in the year 2003, way back. And when we did that, all the negotiations of all the countries were based on their national constitution. So our constitution is very clear. And that is where I would say the leadership needs to take a view, a strong kind of a opinion. Because you see, you can commit mistakes like they have done in bringing in a ban on ends and related cigarettes. But what I would like to say here is consumers' right to choice cannot be denied at any cost. And at the same time, the paramount issue is safety, education, assuring quality. And we have to ensure that these laws, when they are made, because the best friend of a consumer is standard and healthy competition. And in order to bring in healthy competition, you need to bring in regulations to regulate the market so that the market behaves in an ethical manner and the consumers are able to take an informed choice based on credible information created by credible institutions, not by institutions which are being funded for certain vested interest, and they bring out reports like you see, Rini, every second day some report is being churned out. No, we want a robust report based on the fundamentals, based on credible approaches and methodology which are not biased, which are neutral. And the government's duty is and responsibility is to ensure that the constitution of our country is not compromised. We have compromised in terms of our right as a citizen by banning a product which could have helped us to reduce harm. And as an addict of tobacco products, and on behalf of the addicts of the tobacco products, I would like to mention that you have denied them their constitutional right, which is not right, which is not correct. Because as per our constitution, you see, we have to make sure that the government comes in as a controller, not as a dictator. You can control, you can manage, you can, navigate, you can calibrate. So a law has to be there which will regulate in terms of harm reduction. And Rini, I'll give you a latest update. I just read a report 48 hours before from Hong Kong, which said that there was a 9% reduction in consumption of tobacco products in Hong Kong due to increase in the sale of e-cigarettes. There was an increase in the sale of e-cigarettes. And what did it show? It showed that you empowered the consumer to make an informed choice based on the market forces, brought in competition, and the conventional tobacco products started decreasing. So we have to innovate. We have to encourage science. We have to encourage scientists who will take care of the health of the citizens. Nobody can say on this world that tobacco is not a deadly product. Everybody knows that. We all know it. But it's a legitimate product being sold legitimately in the supply chain under a regulation. And we have a schedule which talks about which are these products. So why couldn't ends get included in that schedule under the existing COTPA Act and have another exclusive law to ban such a product? I mean, I think there is something wrong in that decision-making process. Where it went wrong, I don't know. But there was something wrong which we need to correct and get back that empowerment within the consumers.
Yeah, let me hold you there, Professor Misra, because the point that you raised that Hong Kong has given you this new report of the 7% reduction or 9% reduction that has taken place. I want to go to Ms. Basu with that. I mean, do you think perhaps policymakers should be evaluating harm reduction strategies from an evidence-based, as Professor Misra mentioned, from an evidence-based approach rather than the legal approach that is prevalent now?
Absolutely. The easy answer is absolutely yes. And as Professor Misra rightly pointed out, that there has been a sort of disjuncture between what is there on the ground reality and what is the letter of the law. If we look at the current legislation, it in theory covers almost every aspect of deterrence. A ban on smoking in public spaces, ban on advertising, not selling to minors. But you go to any panwari, you will see a 10-year-old selling you the packet itself. So that exposure is absolutely, in the current context, devoid of the reality. So deterrence will only come in when there is effective implementation of these legislations. So for that reasons, it's important for policymakers and people in the legislative framework to also understand that what are the harm reduction strategies that is going to work and actually create an impact on the people. We have seen that even prohibition in states like Bihar has actually not really resulted in that sort of it's been limited to more of a political ambivalence. Right now, smoking and legislations related to smoking is considered to be less harmful than legislations which deal with other drugs and alcohol. So, of course, that sort of dichotomy results in sort of a resistance amongst the people to follow the law. But having said that, we need to understand that even the Kotpa Act in 2003 came in as a result of as a result of litigation. So we needed that Murli as Deora versus Union of India to actually bring up the cause of passive smoking. So if we look at, just to think about, what are the possible harm reduction strategies, some evidence is that we can see that of course, from the end cessation program, we see that the focus is on, quit tobacco sort of or reducing the tobacco consumption. But again, as you pointed out, only 2% of Indian smokers quit on an annual basis. But if we go back to the whole, landscape reduction, so passive smoking is a huge problem. So again, why are we not limiting ourselves to just those designated smoking areas? Why is that ambivalence about, okay, an open space, a public park or a road, you can smoke? So these are all these, ambivalence which results in people breaching the law. And advertising also, if you go for a movie, you would see all these, films coming out, but it's become a limerick today. People make fun of it. In fact, the poor guy who's shown has become memes, has become a meme now. So it's evidence-based approach is, of course, the way forward. But again, I would want to add one small caveat here is that police action or implementation on ground needs to also maintain proportionality when it comes to sort of implementing these laws. Just one law in point was the Maharashtra gutka ban, which resulted in a lot of prosecution, and then there were challenges in the Supreme Court which has sort of overturned those decisions. So these are all these multiple factors, and here we cannot do without evidence from the consumers, from NGOs, from stakeholders to actually inform our laws. So I do believe that yes, there's a lot of merit in bringing evidence-based approach while formulating our harm reduction strategies.
Thank you very much, Yashaswini. I'll turn to Samrat now, who's been, with us on other panels as well. I mean, how can we, Samrat, better sensitize both our lawmakers and consumers and lay public to the benefits of switching to less harmful alternatives? Give us, some concrete ideas as to how this can happen.
Thank you, Rini, and hello to the panelists and everyone watching. So a lot of what I will say is in some ways said before, so I encapsulate, and it's one of the things that happens when you speak last. But that said, I think the first thing we need to look at is to dispel myths. Now, tobacco in our country is a huge problem. It's the largest killer of Indians. And I would imagine that would require that level of effort to solve a crisis like that. But despite that, we have a lot of myths. A recent study showed that a majority of Indian doctors think that nicotine causes cancer. It doesn't. That's not in the smoke or in the cigarette or even in the bidi or keni or gutka is what's killing people. Nicotine is not a carcinogen, and it's not killing people. And yet so many people believe that. A lot of policymakers believe that all nicotine products are bad or equally bad, right? Now, so that level of misinformation first needs to be countered. And I think there's a lot of evidence-based approach and policy making that will result if people have the right facts. And then we have Dr. Desai here, and they have led the drugs harm reduction movement for decades, such that harm reduction measures are now integral part of drugs control. So we need to, I think, also impress upon policymakers that harm reduction works, and it has worked so significantly in, there has been a long war on drugs. People have been incarcerated, and then they figured, okay, that's not the way. Let's work with drug users. Let's give them options. Let's give them agency. And why not let's do with 1.3 billion people who smoke. So I think, and there's a lot of evidence there. There's a lot of studies. There's a lot of efficacy reports there, which can be shared. I think also policymakers need to realize what's happening in other countries. Professor Sweenor was speaking earlier, significant reduction in Japan. If you look at UK, US, there has been accelerated decline in smoking in all age groups after introduction of harm reduction strategies. So to show to them that, yes, this works, and and it's worked across the world, why would it not work here? I think also it's important that solutions, THR or harm reduction solutions, we build ground up, so that all stakeholders are a party to it and benefit from it. So I think farmers also need to be looked at. Okay, so how does this, so when the ban was being discussed, a section of farmers came out and said, no, this is going to hurt us. It was not. I mean, the nicotine is still coming from tobacco, right? So, but it's safer tobacco. I mean, that's same nicotine, liquid nicotine is also being used in gums and patches. So, and so therefore they also need to be part of the solution. What about so many BD workers and tobacco workers, and how do we include them? So, the whole abstinence approach, only approach also negates these people. Like what happens to them if everyone stops using tobacco? With THR or harm reduction, you at least have employment for them, but this needs to be looked at, studied, and laid out in form of policy proposals. Also, I think we need to. I mean, policymakers also want to see the financial argument, right? So there is a strong financial argument here. You will be taxing these products, but you'll be losing a lot less money in tobacco-related mortality and morbidity. Like currently, for example, we lose 5x amount of money in the losses than we make in revenue. So those kind of arguments also need to be made to policymakers so that they see that, okay, in the larger picture, it is still beneficial to reduce harm for the population, and a population which is suffering the gravest consequences, right? Like 1.35 million deaths a year is huge. And finally, I think consumers need to be part of policy making. It's been said before. I mean, these are the people who are dying. These are the people who are paying taxes. And strangely, they are not part of the discourse. And, you need to go to them and ask them what works for you, what doesn't. What we have right now is a top-down punitive approach. Ye ban kar do, let's ban smoking zones. Let's make life more difficult for them. What you are doing in effect is encouraging people to break those laws. And so that's not helping anyone. And then also, in terms of a ban, like, a speaker was saying earlier. So, you banned because you wanted to protect the kids. They still have access to these products. And earlier in a regulated market, there were some checks and balances. But now the black market doesn't have those checks and balances. So in fact, it's become easier for them to access these products. So you haven't really helped that population group with a ban like that. What you have done is you have discouraged adult smokers from making a switch, adult smokers who don't want to engage with the black market, especially women smokers, who face really serious consequences from tobacco use. They certainly don't want to engage with the black market. And so many who had switched to less harmful products have now switched back to smoking. So that I don't think is a very positive outcome. And one small footnote, I think the government is also addicted to tobacco revenue and also participates directly in the tobacco trade. So I think if government gave up its addiction to tobacco, we'll all be well served.
And as such, reality tonight, war is concerned. Let me now ask the entire panel, and maybe any of you can answer this question or address this question. What do you think about the fact that India has missed its public health opportunity with these bans that we have on e-cigarettes, etc.? And do you think that the government should independently assess the want of their citizens, of their consumers, of that community, and avoid consulting external voices like the WHO, the NGOs, or the middlemen who don't have a proper understanding of Indian consumers? What are your thoughts on that? Professor Misra, would you like to start off by addressing any of those?
Thank you. Thank you, Rini. Thank you. First I want to remind all the viewers and also my panel members, today is the World No Tobacco Day.
Right.
And as we all know, that it is being celebrated or observed, I would say, observed as a day to bring in policies which will enable consumers to ensure that they get more protected and they are able to manage themselves in a manner which is scientifically proved. Because as I always have said, that the tobacco addicts is not a kind of a habit. It's a chronic kind of a disease. They can't do without it. It's like any patient who has got, diabetes or hypertension. So we have to, because we have a doctor in the panel also, he would also agree that they need counseling, a huge amount of counseling. They need hand-holding. And that is why we observe this World No Tobacco Day, to bring and remind us. And this year, the theme is, how do you protect the environment? So we have to give options, alternatives. We have to bring in more empowerment, counseling in terms of we have to, in order to move forward. So my only take is that on this day, the World No Tobacco Day, let us appeal to the government that please have a revisit, relook into the policy and bring in such a regulation which will help the citizens or the addicts to quit smoking or quit tobacco consumption, rather than you banning. And as I heard other panel members saying, that other than encouraging counterfeiting, substandard products being sold, unregulated products being sold in the grey market, and encouraging cross-border smuggling and depriving the country of its genuine revenue. So we need to look at all these aspects. And I think it's been a great conversation. Everyone in the panel has brought in very good dimensions in terms of how to move forward.
Right, we still have a lot more left, Professor Misra. Yashaswini, if I could bring you in, do you have any insights into this?
Apologies, there seemed to be a sudden blackout at the office, but I hope you can hear you can hear me and see me?
Yes, we do.
Okay, lovely. I completely echo what Professor Misra said, and in fact, to bring in some of the very useful insights brought forward by Mr. Chowdhery, any sort of blanket legislation doesn't really help. Right now, this blanket ban on e-cigarettes, and if we go back to the roster of the courts, almost every pending litigation related to tobacco and smoking is for or challenging this notification and for the reversal of this ban. So there definitely is some merit in evaluating what has been banned and why has it been banned and what can be included. So from a very multi-stakeholder approach, understanding the needs of the consumption, and again, e-cigarettes need not just be nicotine based, right? And again, not all substances that's used in e-cigarettes are, carcinogenic. So again, understanding what is the harm principle and what can be implemented through the harm reduction is the way forward. That way, you will pacify or at least, have a set of followers as well. And this can be implemented, but at the same time, black marketing, which is a huge problem, that will be eliminated. So having said that, I am also quite worried about the effects of passive smoking. So maybe we need to think about what is the right way, even when we allow, or if we at all allow such vaporizers or e-cigarettes to be used, when and where that sort of regulation, rather without clamping down on the freedom of movement of the citizens, we need to think about those lines when we draft any legislation or bring a new law in place.
Thank you, Yashaswini. Dr. Desai, if I could get your voice in.
Yes, Rini, thank you. To respond to your question and to continue from what my friend Samrat was saying, See, the lessons that we need to learn for all such complex personal behavior, social issues is from other related fields. And one of the lessons that we have learned from the fields of HIV, AIDS, disability, mental health, drug abuse, and many others is nothing about us without us. So the first thing you do is bring those people onto the table, around the table, who are affected directly and indirectly. Once you do that, you get real. You see, you stop flying in the clouds and you actually get the ground reality. That's one benefit. Second, you have the cooperation of all the stakeholders. And the advantage here is that if you bring in all the stakeholders, the policies are easier to be implemented as compared to, as Samrat said, policies which are evolved from top down. I must clarify one thing though. Like Bejon said, see, the idea, and I'm saying this for a purpose, the World No Tobacco Day might actually, to the uninitiated or the amateur ones, bring the idea of complete eradication. One thing that science has learned about human behavior in last 50 years more than ever is, like I keep saying, pragmatism. Get real. You know, the utopia of drug-free world and World No Tobacco Day is all great for sloganeering. We all will have to learn as human race, and especially people involved, that you need to ride that twin horse. You want to talk about the ideals, and yet you want to be real.
That's right. It's quite a difficult situation on the ground. You really need to own the circus and the monkeys in the circus. So let me come back to Samrat about this. Samrat, you've got a lot of good ideas, practical ideas that you have which need to be implemented. Tell us what are your thoughts on the question that I had posed to the entire panel.
Sorry, Rini, something happened and it was buffering and I couldn't hear your question fully. Could you quickly repeat it for me?
So
Sorry.
very quickly, I'm basically asking whether you think that we've missed this health opportunity, and do you think that the government should independently assess what it is that the citizens need and avoid listening to consulting or talking to external voices like the WHO or the middlemen or NGOs that really don't know what the ground situation is?
Sure, and I hope you don't mind if I answer it a little forcefully because I feel quite passionately about this. So
About time, I say.
See, the ban I feel was rushed in. It was rushed in because of this whole paranoia created about safer alternatives. So anything new that comes to the market requires some understanding, some science to develop around it. But you have, for example, the Public Health England long ago in 2015 itself had assessed, having looked at the wide range of literature at that time, that these products are significantly less harmful. Not just, like a small reduction. And even if it was even a small reduction, there was still no cause to ban it. But there was a significant harm reduction. However, there was a paranoia created and, the whole kids issue and secondhand exposure issue came into play and it was rushed through, and when the debate took place in Parliament, the health minister at that time said, I know none of you have seen these products. And still they went ahead and spoke for 6 hours and banned it, which was quite evident that they hadn't even seen the product rather than understand, okay, what it is about, what is the paranoia about, there were some, of course, notable exceptions, but most legislators were legislating in absence of information. And I thought that was quite dangerous to do at that point in time. More time could have been sought. A parliamentary committee could have been set up. The health committee, the parliamentary health committee could have looked at it, assessed the evidence, which all the other countries are doing. For example, Hong Kong, or, I think Greece and Malaysia, they have all set up committees and they have invited experts to give opinions, talk about the issue, bring depth, and then take a decision. Here, we didn't do any of that. And then, of course, one is, of course, the government's own direct participation in the tobacco trade, which plays into it in some way. I wouldn't make accusations, but, the way it happened, it appears so. And adding to this perfect storm, of course, like you said, were these international groups. Let's look at the tobacco use in India. It's predominantly a lower economic group, which uses, like the rural India and the slum India and the poor India uses it the most. they're the ones who face the gravest consequences of it. They're the ones who have the least access to healthcare and therefore are least able to afford or manage health consequences from tobacco use. So in a situation like that, and of course you're not providing adequate cessation support, there's no in-person counseling, we have not even subsidized NRTs in our country. So a cigarette smoker cannot afford an NRT, leave alone a BD or a Khanna smoker. So you're not providing cessation support. There's not enough adequate healthcare support. In a situation like that, giving them an option, an affordable option to reduce harm would have worked wonders, right? It would require not that much spending or effort from the government, but just sensitive policy making and encouraging competition or guiding it in a way that keeps consumer safety and everything else in mind. That's all they had to do. And yet they went ahead and banned something which a BD smoker or a snooze. It's not that harm reduction exists only for the smokers. For smokeless tobacco users also, there are less harmful solutions. So you could have done that. You could have given the user agency and a choice and informed them adequately, and it could have worked. But as you said, the international groups were applying policies which they thought work in the Western nations or would work globally. And I think the government fell for that pressure. And it should not have been, because you look at where you stand, where is your tobacco problem, what socio-economic factors play into that, and none of that was considered. So yes, we have missed an opportunity, but I don't think it's too late. There can always be a rethink. So many other countries have revoked their bans after initial, giving into that paranoia, and then they had to consider too. And I don't see why we can't do that too.
Fair enough. Thank you very much, Samrat. We'd like to now take on the final thoughts from Dr. Farrukh Khan, advocate and partner at Diwan Advocates, who has been working on the legal aspects and on other harmless alternatives and the bans, of course, that were imposed. Dr. Farrukh Khan.
Hello, everyone. I'm being asked to share my thoughts on the regulation and policy mechanism as of now, as well as the possible course of action with regards to the consumer rights pertaining to electronic cigarettes, vaping ends. What I understand, that there is no denying of this fact that the menace of tobacco is something very deadly, which the entire world is facing. We are seeing the surge in cases related to cancers and other diseases which are due to the tobacco consumption. That being said, we also know that cigarettes or any other tobacco which is being used by public at large is since time immemorial. And though the government across the world try to persuade their citizens by different programs, etc., to cease and desist and to refrain from consuming tobacco in any form, yet the reality is that tobacco in form of cigarette, pan masala, gutka, khanna, in its many derivatives is still being sold. It's still being sold under license. It is regulated. However, the vaping aspect, the alternate to the combustible and conventional smoking, as we are seeing as it is evident from many research that it is less, much less harmful than the conventional smoking, is being, when it started getting pace in India, the government came up with a very knee-jerk reaction. And we were hoping that the government will regulate it, because at that point of time, even the policy makers and, at that stage, all the concerned stakeholders were coming with this thought that it should be regulated, because it should not be left unregulated, because it will lead to a different type of Pandora box. However, the government came up with the ordinance, and ultimately the bill was enacted into act, and that legislation banning import, export, marketing, selling, and everything came into place. First of all, I would like to point out that to my opinion, it was a knee-jerk reaction. What we were looking for was a regulation. However, that being said, it was not regulated, it was completely banned. At the time when this bill was being discussed in floor of the parliament, I remember, and it is on record, that the then health minister gave a statement at the floor of the parliament that personal consumption is not prohibited, is not banned. It is on record. Meaning thereby, it is a gap, it is a mutually destructive point of view, which I must confess, that it was being said that no, you can use it for your personal consumption, but however, you cannot, it's a very small act, if anybody can go through it. So there are 2 points in this. Number one is that although this ought to have been regulated, which was banned, it was a knee-jerk reaction to my opinion, because you allow normal cigarettes, which are much more harmful than this alternative cigarettes, this electronic cigarettes regime. You allow that, it is being sold in open market. Anybody can go and purchase it. Even the law which we have as of now, nobody can vouch that any tobacco seller or any pan masala and cigarette shop at nearby checks the ID card that whether you are over 18 or not. Even places near to public school, public places like schools, park and everything, though the law as of now mandate that it could not be sold, but the reality is different. Having said that, I'm not saying that this is a problem in implementation of the law. Law itself is not bad, but my point of view is it should have been regulated. You can't allow the more dangerous thing to be sold in open market, and you ban the lesser harmful alternatives available in market. Having said so, it is a need as of now, because many countries in the world are conducting research on this and they are moderating it. Recently, I have seen that in United Kingdom, even in United Arab Emirates, where the nicotine component, the nicotine concentration has been reduced, meaning thereby that governments are regulating it and providing public at large who want to switch from the conventional smoking to alternative smoking, exploring for lesser harmful alternative, are given a choice. So the time is ripe that the government should reconsider this, and instead of banning it in its entirety, it should be regulated. Now, as of now, I can tell you one practical difficulty what we are seeing. Now, as of now, as I told you earlier, that the then health minister of union government gave a statement or record of the floor of the house that personal consumption is not banned. However, based on the ban, what the as of now, you cannot carry your electronic devices like this e-cigarettes or vaping devices to any flight, because what government has done, government has put up an addenda to the AFSEC order, and this has taken this particular product, this e-cigarette, into the AFSEC list, meaning thereby you cannot carry this in airplane. This is though we have challenged that notification, because this addenda itself, because the matter is currently sub judice before Honorable Delhi High Court, and we are expecting, because it is entirely perverse. Though there is so much gap that even the policy makers as of now don't know what they have to do. There are too many gaps. So it is a ripe time, and a correct and appropriate action would be that Government of India should consult with all its stakeholders, industry experts, health experts, and should do away with the complete ban. And instead of banning it in its entirety, it should be regulated and it should be controlled, so that it is not made available to people who should not use this. So this is precisely my submission. And I am so sorry, and I apologize that due to my prior engagements, it would have been very wonderful if I would have joined in a panel discussion, but I'm so sorry because of my court proceedings engagement. And I wish you all the best, and thank you very much for giving me a chance to speak on this topic. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much, Dr. Farrukh Khan. You've really brought up, the real picture, as it were, on the ground. Thank you to all our speakers, Dr. Nimesh Desai, Professor Bejon Misra, Samrat Chowdhery, and of course, Yashaswini Basu. With that very special session that we had on empowering community engagement, creating consumer-friendly regulatory frameworks as the theme here at the Economic Times Consumers Freedom Conclave 2022. We take a break now and come to a close to this session. We trust that you found the insights that were shared of value to you. Thank you for tuning in, and it's back to Ivan Rodrigues.
Thank you, Rini. Once again, I'd like to thank all our panelists for their wonderful insights on creating consumer-friendly regulatory frameworks, empowering community engagements. Thank you for taking time off from your very busy schedules and joining us at the fourth edition of the Consumer Freedom Conclave. We wish you and your respective organizations the very best going forward. And thank you, Rini, once again for doing a fantastic job of moderating this esteemed panel. Do stay tuned in, ladies and gentlemen. We will be back on the other side with the final session of the Consumer Freedom Conclave, which is the keynote address.